Welcome back. Ooh.
Konnichiwa.
Konnichiwa. Armchair Safari with Natalie
and Robin. Where are we going now?
Well,
Kyoto.
I guess we're going to Kyoto.
Tell us about Kyoto.
Well, I'm glad you asked. It's a medium-sized city in Japan, of course. Had about 1.5 million people last time they did a survey. It used to be the capital of Japan in 794, a long time ago. And it was capital for around 11 centuries, and that's a heck of a long time. But after the Onin Wars in the 15th century, it declined in power. So it wasn't until the Tokugawa shogunate came along that it kind of came back into prominence. Today, apart from tourism, of course, it's key industries, electronics. Although, having been to Kyoto many times, you wouldn't really know that it was the home to Nintendo, Kyocera, Omron, Nissin and Yuasa, just to name a few that I pinched from Wikipedia, of course. But it's also considered the cultural capital of Japan and a seat of higher learning. And on top of all that, it has 17 World Heritage Sites. So because it got missed, or it was missed on purpose by the Americans in the Second World War, it's full of a lot of historical significance. So, what's for lunch?
I'm sure you'll find something.
Yeah, well, Japan is rife with these little eateries where you go in, you choose something from the machine, you pop some money in, just like if you're ordering a drink. It gives you a ticket, you hand it over the counter, and they give you whatever it is. In this case, this is pork broth noodles. One of my favourites. So
ramen, isn't it?
Ramen. So lots and lots of these little cafes around. I call them ticket machine cafes, where you can buy an extraordinary range. Sometimes the food actually comes out of the machine, but most of the time you pop the money in and you hand over a ticket. I've even had my hair cut in Japan with a ticket. So I paid for the ticket, got it out of the machine, gave it to the man who was clipping, pointed to a picture.
And pointed to your head.
And pointed to my head, and off they went. Yeah. So there you go. And the last picture, of course, is Lawson. This is a very unusual Lawson sign in brown. It's the only one in the whole of Japan that you'll find, and that's down in the south. So where are we going to next?
Well, this looks like the railway station.
It does look like the railway station, yeah. I'm thinking that when you arrive in Kyoto, you either arrive at the airport or you arrive at this massive, vast railway station. Very famous. It was built in 1997 and it was designed by the Japanese architect Hiroshi Hara. If you've ever been to Osaka, he also designed and built the Umeda Sky Building in Osaka. That's a fairly spectacular building as well. When they originally put the plans forward, everybody in Kyoto was up in arms about it because it's a very traditional place. And this is extremely modern building, but it's now a bit of a monument to modernism, I suppose. It's one of Japan's largest buildings, and I think it's the second largest station apart from Nagoya. It handles 255 million passengers each year, which is a lot of people milling around. So it's always very, very, very busy. And it has this wonderful series of moving escalators. This one takes you up to the top, and you can do a little bit of a tour, sort of right up in the roofage up there, which is fairly spectacular. Not a lot of tourists get up there, but you can just do a tour around there. You don't have to pay money, you can just walk around yourself. And you get right up into these. There's one of the walkways up the top. The place is full of restaurants and cafes and designer stores and supermarkets and electronics markets as well. But it's a good meeting place.
And there's Astro Boy.
And there's Astro Boy, yeah. That's no longer there, actually. They've moved Astro Boy somewhere else, which is a shame.
I liked it.
Astro Boy used to be, yes, a well-known sort of meeting place. So that's Kyoto Ekimae, which is spectacular. And if you're in Kyoto, you will probably spend some time wandering around scratching your head there. So where are we going next?
Well, let's go somewhere a bit more traditional.
This is very
Kiyumizu-dera. This word means the pure water temple. It's an important temple associated with a sect of Japanese Buddhism, founded in 780 on the site of a waterfall east of the city. It's best known for a large wooden terrace or stage jutting out from the main hall, 13 metres above the hillside. There's spectacular views over the surrounding gardens, cherry blossoms in spring, and colourful maples in autumn, when I think these pictures were taken. The main hall and stage are constructed from timber without the use of any nails, which is pretty smart. The waterfall that I mentioned earlier, the Otowa waterfall, is now located at the base of the main hall of the temple. The waters are divided into 3 separate streams, and you can drink from the streams. One of them is said to represent long life, one success in your studies, and one a lucky love life. It's considered greedy to drink from all 3 of them.
There's the terrace. It's spectacular. You get a fantastic view of Kyoto as well.
But that makes you hungry.
It does make you hungry. So you could pop into a cafe and have some chanko nabe, which is sumo food, which is essentially chicken done 5 different ways in this vast bowl of soup with cabbage and dumplings and chicken thighs and chicken wings and chicken legs, to be followed with 8 pints of Guinness, I think.
Where are we now?
So we're in Kinkaku-ji.
So this is also known as the Silver Pavilion.
Silver Pavilion.
And it's another Buddhist temple, although it began as the retirement villa of one of the shoguns, Ashikaga Yoshimasa, in 1482. He had reigned between 1449 and 1473, and in 1485 he became a Zen monk, and he planned that after his death, what had been his villa would become a temple. Now, he modelled it on the Golden Pavilion, which we'll hear about later, which was built by his grandfather, and originally planned to cover this temple in silver foil, but with one thing and another that never happened.
Ran out of cash.
Yeah, maybe, and he died. So the gardens of this place are really quite notable. Apart from the temple buildings and the Silver Pavilion itself, there's a beautiful moss garden and a meticulously raked dry sand Zen garden. There's also ponds and bridges and lots of lovely trees. There's a nice tea house as well.
And look at the views you get over Kyoto.
So, forested hillside and a few mushrooms. Very nice place.
The moss is big in the Silver Pavilion, isn't it? Look at that. It's just stunning. And makes you want to sort of go and lie down on it, doesn't it, really?
It may be frowned upon.
I think it'd be frowned upon. And you might be escorted to the exit, if not thrown into jail, actually. I think that would be... Well, it might be, insulting the national pride, I think, as a lot of Japanese...
Is this a certified place of national beauty?
It probably is, and if it isn't, it should be.
Yeah,
if it isn't, it should be. So, absolutely spectacular gardens. Where are we going after the Silver Pavilion?
Well, if we head south from Ginkaku-ji, the Silver Pavilion, we'll find ourselves on the Philosopher's Walk. Now, this is a pleasant stone pathway. It runs for about 2 kilometres through the Higashiyama district of Kyoto. It follows alongside a canal lined with hundreds of cherry trees, which are especially lovely and quite crowded in springtime. It extends between the Silver Pavilion and the Nanzenji area of Kyoto. It was named for Nishida Kitaro, who was a famous philosopher who lived in Kyoto.
Yep,
He is said... You know?
Oh, yeah.
He speaks highly of you. He's said to have meditated here on his daily walk to get to his job at Kyoto University. And his work was said to have blended Western philosophy with Asian Zen Buddhist thinking, and he was the first person to try and unite those 2 schools of thought. He lived until 1945.
Oh, relatively recent,
quite recently, 20th century.
Yeah. So, from memory, there are quite a few fish in the canal that runs along. I mean, the canal, it is pretty, but I guess it's something you can walk along. There's no traffic. There's a few bicycles and pedestrians.
Traffic.
Yeah. So it is peaceful in that respect. And they have, I don't know, trout or something in the river. And as you've seen here, 1 or 2 other temples that you can visit along the way if you cross the river on little stone bridges. So towards the back. And lots of people in traditional kimono as well. But you do get hungry walking around those canals.
You're always hungry.
So today we're going to have a look at tempura, which, as you see, is basically deep fried food, battered food, but in a very light batter They say they put soda water into the batter to make it even lighter. And it's absolutely oishi.
Very delicious.
So where are we going to go next? We're going to go to Kinkaku-ji.
That's pretty golden.
It is.
Building.
It is.
What sort of building is it?
Its English name is the Golden Temple, and probably one of the Golden Pavilion, one of the most popular, as you can see here, with a lot of very noisy school kids in the pouring rain. So rain or shine, it has busloads of people arriving, and you can see in better weather it is beautiful. It's a Zen temple in northern Kyoto, and the top 2 floors are covered in gold leaf. So it's quite an important temple for the Japanese. It was a Zen temple of the Rinzai sect. I don't really know much about them, but it was the inspiration for the Silver Pavilion, which we've just come from. In 1950, interestingly, in 1950 the pavilion was burnt down by a 22-year-old novice monk, Hayashi Yoken. He then attempted to commit suicide on the sort of hill behind the building, but unfortunately he survived and was subsequently taken into custody. So he was sentenced to 7 years in prison, but he was released because of mental illness. You know, he had a persecution complex and schizophrenia, apparently.
Poor man.
Yeah, he died of tuberculosis in 1956. And a version of these events is really the sort of centre of a Mishima book, Yukio Mishima's 1956 The Temple of the Golden Pavilion.
So as a sort of historical novelist.
Sort of, yeah. Okay. Yeah, Mishima was a bit of a character himself. I think he ended up by committing suicide himself, which was fairly gory. So you can see, like the Silver Temple, it has some wonderful moss. And in this temple you can see some wonderful examples of the gardeners creating sort of false shadows underneath trees, so that even if it's raining,
coloured moss.
Yeah, different coloured, darker moss under the trees. So even if it's overcast, it looks like there's a sort of heavy shadow, which is quite clever. And the funny thing is, when you leave to go back to the car park or the bus stop, you go through the gift shop, of course, and the monks are just coining it down the back there, selling you all these little souvenirs. You can buy a candle, you can get wafted with some incense. But it's well worth going to see.
To them.
It is very important and well worth going to. Avoid it like the plague on a holiday season day or a weekend, actually. If you can go in the weekday, it's even better. Gosh. Better have some lunch.
Hungry work all this
It is. Tonkatsu is essentially pork cutlet. Served with a salad is delicious. Oishi. And you can get this all over Japan. Staple food. Now, I went to the Umikoji Steam Railway Museum in 2008, a long time ago. And this is it's a museum, obviously. It has 23 steam locomotives, quite close to Kyoto Railway Station.
And hundreds of school kids.
It's since been upgraded to become the Kyoto Railway Museum. But when I was there, it just had steam locos and a couple of working locos, as you can see here, which is fantastic. So the Japanese are as mad about steam locomotives as the British are, I suppose. So some of the locomotives date back to 1880, which is pretty old, and they're still in working condition. Currently it's got 23 steam locos, 3 diesel locomotives, 5 electric locomotives, 6 Shinkansens from different periods, plus loads of DMUs and EMUs.
What are those?
Well, good question. Diesel motor units and electric motor units. So just commuter trains,
So they're
I
not
guess.
big birds.
No, they're not emus, no, they're just sort of commuter trains. But, interesting anyway, because as we know, Japan is pretty much up there front and foremost in terms of transport with its rail system, and is currently working on a maglev rail system, which means that you'll get from Tokyo to Osaka in about an hour faster than you can currently do, because the trains will travel up to 500 kilometers an hour. That's eye-wateringly fast. Yeah, pretty good. So again, we're going to get pretty hungry. Oh no, we're going to have to forego lunch. I'm going to go straight into this wonderful place called Shisendo, which again is north of the Silver Temple there. It's a little bit harder to get to because you have to get on a bus rather than, there's no railway or subway station. And again, it's up in the mountains on the eastern part of Kyoto and is beautiful. It's initially a hermit's retreat, a former samurai soldier turned classic scholar and also badging himself as an architect. A man called Ishikawa Jose built the shrine in 1641 as his retirement pad. It actually has 36 portraits of ancient Chinese poets.
So is that who he studied?
Yes, it is. Yeah. And most people miss them, and they're sort of round the inside of the villa itself. It's most noted, of course, for its gravel garden, its Zen garden.
Autumn leaves.
And the colours in the autumn are stunning. You know, I've been there in summer as well, which is very pretty, but the autumn is very special, as it is for most Japanese temples and shrines, just simply because of the colours, as you can see here. Even in the pouring rain, I think it was pretty wet on this time that I went. One thing that I remember about this that I point out to other people I've taken and shown this place is that Charles and Di visited here many years ago. Now I was going to say a few years ago, but now it's many, many years ago. And when you leave along this little laneway through a bamboo grove. So this is like a mini version of the bamboo grove which we're going to see when we go to Sagano, which is part again of a World Heritage preserved area of Kyoto. After all this walking, now I am a bit hungry.
Ah.
Yeah, so we better have some okonomiyaki. So this is lunch or probably dinner, very famous. It's like economy pancake with chili sauce. Here's a special spade for cooking it if you're actually in a place where you can cook it yourself. They just bring you the ingredients and you burn it in front of yourself. Or you can go to an okonomiyaki specialist restaurant. So it's basically a pancake with bacon and stuff. It's so tasty. So having been replete with lunch, we're full up with okonomiyaki, we're going to go to Enkoji. Enkoji is just across the way from Shisendo, and again it's one that tourists don't always get to. Very famous for its autumnal colours, as you can see here. Again, it's another temple of the Rinzai sect, and it's very close to the Shukakuin Imperial Villa. And it was founded in 1601, so I suppose by Kyoto standards, it's actually reasonably new. By Tokugawa Ieyasu, he was one of the famous shoguns who brought about the Edo period in 1603 to 1867. It also served as a school and was open to the common public. Its principal object of worship is a statue of the thousand-armed Kannon Bodhisattva. But we didn't see that. You just see this wonderful autumnal colours and the carp pond.
Now,
back into the centre for the Yasaka
Shrine. This is an important Shinto shrine located in Gion, founded in 656, but most of the present buildings date from 1654. A notable feature is a huge 9.5 metre high granite torii gate, erected in 1666. It's one of the tallest gates in Japan. Now, each of these lanterns displayed around that stage that we can see here bears the name of a local business. And of course, that is in return for a donation to the shrine, yes. The shrine's a very popular place to visit around midnight on New Year's Eve. Worshippers try to take home a piece of the flame from the sacred fire in the shrine and use that to cook the first meal of the new year. That's very auspicious for good luck and good fortune and all those good things in the coming year.
It is if you've got a gas cooker.
Well,
in fact, lots of good if you've got an electric stove.
Or if you have to build a fire in your house.
Yeah.
Anyway, they have a very famous summer festival every July called the Gion Matsuri at this place. It's been happening for over 1,000 years, and it features a massive procession including people in period costume, richly decorated floats, horses and so forth, and it commemorates the occasion in the year 869 when the holy object from the shrine was paraded through the streets in order to ward off an epidemic.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the festival was cancelled in 2020 because of the COVID pandemic, which I think is a little ironic. You never know what good it might have done.
Yeah, absolutely.
And here we are here at night.
It's a little bit weird also when you consider, I mean, being non-Japanese reader, I can't read what it says on the lanterns, but it would be like walking into a place and it's just got adverts for Bunnings and for Priceline chemist hanging from these. I'd imagine they're a similar sort of thing. The local tyre workshop. Anyway, it's a wonderful place to visit and a really good place to take photographs. So I wonder where we're going to next. So Yasaka is pretty much central Kyoto, so I think we should go to Fushimi Inari, which is about 3 train stops south of the railway station after dinner. And so for dinner, we could have it for lunch, I suppose. Yeah, is of course raw fish and
some wasabi.
And of course, it's what Japan is famous for. And regardless of where it is, it'll be fantastic.
Now we're in Fushimi.
It's Fushimi, finally.
So this is one of Kyoto's most impressive sites.
Check out these pants.
They're very in tune with their environment, those girls in their red
yes.
pants. So it's an important Shinto shrine, and it's dedicated to Inari, the deity of rice, sake, and prosperity, all things that are very important in Japan, along with selfies. So it's quite a striking complex, a lot of this brilliant vermilion red painted on.
It's a very vermilion place.
It certainly is.
Yeah.
Another notable thing is that foxes feature prominently at the shrine, and here come a couple
There's a couple
now.
of foxes there, yeah.
They are believed to be Inari's messengers, the deity. They're often portrayed with a key to the rice granary in their mouth because they're the protector of the stores of rice. That's one of their jobs. Another thing that you'll be impressed by is the row upon row upon row of over 1,000 vermilion torii gates, which stretch up the hillside of Mount Inari.
These are
Here
just
are some little
souvenirs,
souvenirs, but the actual full-size ones are really quite striking, and here's some of them now.
I think there are more than 1,000, seriously. They're just...
I didn't count them.
No, well...
They were all donated by individuals or companies hoping for success, and the names of the businesses or individual donors is inscribed on the back, as you can see here. The largest gates can cost over 1 million yen. The shrine was founded in 711, but moved to its present location in 816. The main shrine that we see today was built in 1499. There's many little mini shrines scattered through the grounds as well. You can go for a walk of 2 or 3 hours to get to the top of the mountain, passing through lots of these torii gates. But when you get to the top and even along the journey, you'll have a wonderful view of Kyoto. People come here to pray for bountiful harvests, success in business, and success in life in general.
It's now, I think, Kyoto's number 1 or number 2 visited spot.
Oh, that's lovely.
Which has changed in the 20 years that I've been going there. So counting all those foxes is bound to make you hungry. It is. So we better have some lunch. Now I just put this in.
Japanese food?
Well, not really. The Elora Curry House. Yeah, the Elora Curry House was something that I had in the UK.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So we're heading out to Tofuku-ji. Again, this is sort of on the way to Fushimi Inari. It's another large Zen temple. It's one railway station south of Kyoto railway station. So it's very local. And it's famous because of its spectacular autumn colours, which are, absolutely amazing. It also has a sort of gravel garden, a Zen garden. Here it is. A very pretty, thoughtful place to wander around. Of course, when you go there, there'll be 100,000 other people visiting, all taking pictures. It has this wonderful wooden bridge that goes over a very steep ravine. And of course, from the wooden bridge, you get some fantastic views of the autumnal colours.
This is a nice moss garden.
It's a beautiful moss garden, yeah. So it's one of the principal Zen temples in Kyoto, and head temple, one of the schools of the Rinzai sect again, which keeps cropping up. It has a 22-metre high Sanmon gate, which is the oldest Zen gate of its kind dating back to 1425. Some of the other buildings are relatively new, because as in Japan, all over Japan, some of them burned down. They're made out of wood. Some of them are destroyed due to war, but just sometimes negligence. Somebody was throwing a cigarette butt in the wrong direction and the thing caught fire and burnt to the ground. But that's history for you. Well worth visiting, certainly in the autumn, because as I say, you can see here the colours are spectacular. And now we better have something to eat.
Looks like spaghetti.
Yeah, you'll find quite a bit of Japanese fusion here. And this is a spaghetti house that serves pasta, of course, mixed up with Kyoto vegetables. So some strange things like lotus root and whatnot in sort of what we'd call regular European food. It's absolutely delicious and very tasty, very interesting.
Now,
Heading into the nightlife area.
so this is the famous entertainment district and place where you might get to spot a geisha or her apprentice.
Cool.
So,
What are the apprentices
I'll get
called?
to that in a minute.
Okay.
So this area is filled with shops, high-end restaurants and tea houses. There's a high concentration of traditional wooden merchant houses, many of which have been converted into restaurants. And it's a very pleasant place for an evening stroll, even if you're not going to engage the services of a geisha. Geisha, or as they're known in the Kyoto dialect, geiko, are widely misunderstood. They're not prostitutes, but highly skilled traditional entertainers.
one?
Could be.
No, I think that's just
Probably
a
not.
girly.
You don't usually see them.
in a
They're
kimono.
very secretive. They attend guests during meals, banquets and other social events, and their role is to amuse, to help things run smoothly, to make guests feel at their ease in conversation, and so on. They train for 5 years to become a geisha, and during the apprenticeship period they're known as meiko. They learn traditional Japanese arts, including dance, singing, playing instruments such as the shamisen, and the tea ceremony, of course. Their services are really very expensive and mostly out of the reach of ordinary tourists, but there are some ways you can experience geisha culture by attending regular performances in theatres in this area, and also ordinary people can pay to get dressed up in the costume just for fun.
We'll have a look at that later.
Pontocho is a similar sort of area, a narrow pedestrianised alley nearby to Gion, and it's again lined by these beautiful traditional wooden buildings. They mainly function as restaurants and bars, and again another pleasant spot for an evening stroll or to have dinner.
And my advice when you go to any of these places is to check the price. You can see the prices on the outside. If you can see how much stuff costs, it's probably safe to go in. But Pontocho especially has many cafes and restaurants, I call them restaurants really, that don't have any indication of what they are from the outside. And I would recommend you avoid those like the plague, because you may be mildly shocked at the bill, as you can see here. But there are a number of places these days. And I've been to a sake bar in Pontocho, which was a wonderful place. Mostly they can handle about 10 people, that's it.
Very intimate.
So, well, it's very intimate, yes. So very, very small family-run businesses that have been there for, in some cases, generations. Oh, what's for lunch? Japanese curry. And curry rice is like seasoned gravy, really, with rice and some veggies. It's actually quite nice.
Not really like Indian curry.
Nothing like Indian curry, but you need it to bolster yourself for a trip to
Okoshi Senso Villa. This is a nice place. It's a complex of pavilions, including a tea house where they serve matcha green tea and a Japanese sweet treat to all visitors, included in the admission price. The main reason for visiting, of course, though, is the spectacular gardens, which have been designed to highlight all 4 seasons. The plants you can see include cherry blossom trees, Japanese maples like these, azaleas and pine trees, depending on the season. It's the former estate of a famous silent film actor, Okoshi Denjiro, who lived from 1898 to 1962. His films included period dramas featuring realistic sword fights, lots of swashbuckling, and also he made some war movies in World War II. Some of the titles you may or may not be familiar with are The Giant, The Men Who Tread on the Tiger's Tail, and Eagle of the Pacific.
Right. He was the Errol Flynn of the Japanese film industry.
Yeah.
I think, yeah.
But aside from his acting career, he spent 30 years planning and creating these beautiful gardens, and they are a delight to visit.
They're absolutely
Highly
stunning.
recommended.
Absolutely stunning. Look at that. Even in the rain, I think we read that it was raining, wasn't it? You get this marvellous view of Kyoto off in the distance, and spectacular. And it's a little bit away from the bamboo grove, so a lot of people miss out, which is their loss.
It is. It's nice to go somewhere that's not too crowded.
Yeah, and once owned by a swashbuckling Japanese film star.
We all need more swashbuckling in our lives.
We do. Nothing like a swashbuckle.
No.
Well, very close to where we were is another little temple called Gyoji. And Gyoji, you'd miss it in Areshiyama if you weren't specifically looking for it. This was named thus after a person called Gyo, and she was a dancer who was jilted by Taira no Kiyamori, who was one of the local big knobs. And she was jilted in the favour of another stage-named performer called Hotoke Gozen, or Lady Buddha. So she retired as a nun along with her mum and younger sister Ginyo. And then a year later she was also joined by the woman who took over from her. So the noble obviously had a whole line of...
Short attention span.
of young ladies. He got tired of them and they went off. So they got joined by Hotoke Gozen, and they basically ran this as a little nunnery, a little monastery, which is quite amazing. At the moment it's very famous for its moss. And on the times that we've been there, it's been quite wet, so it kind of suits the viewing of the moss and, of course, the beautiful flowers. And it's probably 10 minutes. I think we caught a cab from the railway station. It's a very quick 5 or 7 minute trip in a cab, or you can walk there in 20 or 30 minutes. But very pleasant place to stroll around, as well as popping over the road to another monastery which is just 10 meters away. So now if we walk on down the road from Gyoji, we will end up in Sagano, which again is a fantastic spot, very, very, very popular with tourists. As you can see here, it's kind of hard to get a shot unless you go at sort of 6 in the morning or 10 o'clock at night. Interestingly, I mean, this is again World Heritage. It's only about 200 metres wide and about a mile long, 2-3 kilometres long. But the noise of the cane, the bamboo clanking together in wind, that the Japanese Ministry of Environment has designated the locations oral pleasures of one of the country's 100 soundscapes of Japan. I'm not quite sure whether it's number 1 or number 100. But it's an initiative designed to encourage the local population to get out and appreciate the country's acoustic wonders. It certainly is very beautiful, and there's this lovely shrine in the middle of it. It has its own little moss garden with a bridge. There's a little photo of it, and here's another sort of aerial
the noise
view.
that it made was quite astonishing.
It was. And there are a number of little gardens you can pop into to the left and to the right as you walk through the grove itself if you want to pay extra money. But the grove, as I say, especially early in the morning or late in the evening when most of the people have cleared off, is a spectacular experience. Again, another thing to do in western Kyoto is to travel to Kamioka, which is a town about 20 minutes outside of Kyoto, and then you jump on a raft and head down the Hozu River on one of these rafts, again with sort of 20 other people. And I've been lucky enough to do this a couple of times now, and it's spectacular, it's really good. Especially, of course, during times when we've got lots of water in the river, because then we go faster. And also in the autumn, because as you can see, the valleys are quite steep, the mountains are quite steep either side, and they're covered in just a multitude of colours. And all the time, the old bloke in the boat, and in fact every time I've been, just natters away and keeps the Japanese people well entertained. There's much mirth. Sometimes they even strike up a song, but the young ones are sort of paddling or poling the boat where it goes a little bit slower. And then when you get down the bottom, I presume they put them onto a flatbed truck and take the truck and the boat back up to the top. The whole thing takes about an hour and a half to 2 hours. Just again, it depends on the amount of water that's there. But it's actually good fun. They have little sort of plastic things at the side of the boat, so that if you get into a particularly wet spot, you can kind of pull it up and cover yourself.
Is anyone sick?
It's not really that dangerous. It's not really that bumpy. It is Japan after all. They have to.
But you're not going to be seasick.
No. But there are a few areas where you see you sort of whiz through, isn't it? And just going over the rapids. It is quite exciting. And for some reason, every time I've been in one of these boats, I always get sort of up to the back. The locals, maybe. The locals, the shorter people, always go up the front. But it's fun. So during the Edo period, the river was used for carrying grain, firewood, and other cargo down the river, and trains and trucks basically took over. And you'll see lots of railway crossings where the famous romantic train crosses. It's another thing to do when you're in Western Kyoto. I think the boat ride is probably the best. And just before you get into the end of the trip, this little boat appears out of nowhere, and it's kind of a restaurant boat or cafe. So you can buy hot food, cold beer, a net of oranges, some roasted chestnuts.
All you could possibly want.
Yeah, pretty much. So a ferocious bit of business goes on for about 5 minutes, and then they part company. And then this is at the bottom. You can see people boating on the very calm waters of the Hozu River, and panning up to the top of the mountain. It gives you a good idea of the amazing autumnal colours that you get in this part of Kyoto. So now we're going to have a look at Areshiyama.
So Areshiyama is a name for this sort of general area, which is a popular day trip destination from Kyoto. As we've seen, there's leafy hillsides scattered with temples and shrines, and of course that remarkable bamboo grove. There is a famous temple called Tenryuji, and it again is a major site of the Renzai Zen Buddhist sect.
Here it is. Yes.
It was founded in 1339 after one of the priests had a dream of a dragon rising from a river. The name Tenryu means heavenly dragon. The temple was built in an effort to appease the dragon. They interpreted the dream that the priest had as a sign that the emperor's spirit was uneasy and had to be placated, so they built the temple.
Oh, it's obvious, yeah.
Yeah. There's a 33-hectare garden that's particularly lovely, especially in the spring and autumn. There's a 14th century Zen garden which uses the backdrop of the Arashiyama Mountains as an example of the famous Japanese concept of borrowed landscape in garden design. And this garden was designed by a famous garden designer, Muzo Soseki. It's been designated a special place of scenic beauty in Japan.
Good old Muzo. Here we are, leaving the temple in a little bit of a hurry.
In a hurry.
Yeah.
Got a train to catch.
Interestingly, you can get a train from Arashiyama back into Kyoto, of course, or you can get onto one of the trams, I think run by the... I can't remember the name of it, but it's like a private line, and it runs along the back streets behind shops and stuff, and it's run by a man wearing white gloves, and all the seats have got doilies on them. And the Rinden, I think it was Randen, that's called the Randen railway line, and that's something that a lot of tourists miss. And before you get onto the platform, you can take your shoes and socks off and dangle your feet into a hot spring. So here's the Randen line, there it is, at the Arashiyama end, and here's the gentleman pre-COVID wearing a mask, of course, and white gloves.
All this makes you hungry.
Yeah, I'm getting really hungry. So if you're in Kyoto, you really need to have kaiseki at one stage.
This is quite posh.
It is very posh, it's quite expensive, and incorporates dozens of dishes, all immaculately preserved.
It's a bit like a degustation
prepared,
style,
yes.
isn't it?
And I would hate to be doing the washing up. And you're probably up for $100 minimum per person per seating, but absolutely exquisitely displayed in different.
And they have special plates, don't they?
They do, yeah, depending on which season. So you'd have an autumnal setting, a spring, summer, and winter setting. Yes, couldn't think of the 4 seasons there. There you go, a bit of beef. And on occasion where I've been with a group and we've had this, it takes 10 minutes before anybody actually starts eating because we're so busy photographing the food.
Nishiki Market, or Kyoto's Kitchen.
Kyoto's Kitchen.
This is a narrow covered pedestrianised shopping street which stretches over 5 blocks.
There it is.
And it focuses on food and its preparation. You can buy all sorts of things to eat and also cooking tools such as high quality Japanese knives, chopsticks, etc. Everything's locally produced. The culinary delights that you can indulge in offerings include seafood, pickles, sweets, lots of pickles, vegetables, snacks, seaweed crackers. Many of the stores offer samples of food.
This is bonito.
Okay,
yeah.
Here's some more pickles.
More pickles.
In the rest of Japan, it's considered quite bad manners to eat while you're walking, but in Nishiki Market, you might just about get away with it. if you feel like you can't resist munching on an octopus skewer. These vegetables are quite remarkable.
Some of them are sort of pickled in miso,
Right.
pickled plums, and more. These are samples.
Delicious.
So it could be just lunch.
One good thing to buy in Nishiki Market is kyoyasai. These
What's
are
that?
Kyoto vegetables.
Ah.
Now, these are held in high regard in Japan. They're heirloom vegetables which originate in the Kyoto prefecture. They're believed to have more minerals, vitamins and fibre than ordinary vegetables, and therefore are better for your health. Depending on the season, they can include tomatoes, eggplant, cucumbers, peas, sweet corn, green peppers, turnips, radishes, carrots, cabbage, cauliflower, broccoli, onions and strawberries.
Everything.
Even things that you've never heard of.
Right.
They're quite expensive. Here's a little shrine nearby, isn't it? Yeah.
There are several shrines. And interesting, the Kyoto vegetables are very popular for tourists because they can buy them in packets that have been sealed and take them home. It's very parochial. You won't find them, in the north of Japan or the south of Japan.
Quite a speciality.
Quite a speciality, yeah.
There's little fish.
Little fish.
And this is the bonito.
The bonito being shaved.
Oh, and there's a puffer fish
Yeah.
on display.
On display.
And some lovely shellfish. The shopkeepers were really quite friendly and beautifully dressed and professional. Here's some sake.
Yeah. It's a wonder to me that because a lot of tourists go to this particular market and they don't always buy anything, so it's kind of tough for them because they're trying to make a buck. And we're going, oh, that's nice, I'll take a photo, but I don't really want to buy one.
Here's some Kyoto carrots.
And fish balls, dumplings. And as you can see, each person who works in the market has their own sort of emblazoned logo on their gear.
You can also buy nice souvenirs.
Touristy
like
stuff, yeah.
This man's delivering
Something.
sweeties and delicacies
Yeah.
to this lady. Some turnips. Oh, and there's the octopus
There's
balls.
octopus on a stick. Yeah.
And some
Sweeties.
Beautifully decorated.
So I think the market actually opens at 10 o'clock, so if you go early it'll all be closed. But it's a spectacular, and it's surrounded by other covered shopping streets.
There's some smoked fish.
There's some smoked
Good
fish
for
there.
breakfast.
Yeah, it's very typical Japanese breakfast food. So well worth having a wander around one afternoon or one morning, because who knows, there are lots of other shops that are of interest around the area. It's one of my favourite shopping areas, actually.
Here's another Lawson.
There's another Lawson, yeah, always ready at hand. Kombini store.
Convenience.
So what's happening next? We're going to Heian Jingu.
What happens there?
Well, Heian is a very big shrine. It has a monster torii gate straddling the main road up to the sort of front of it. Again, it's decorated in this beautiful timbered, vermilion painted construction. It dates back to 1895, so it's not old.
Very old at all.
No, it's not old at all. And it was built on the occasion of the 1100th anniversary of the capital's foundation, and is dedicated to the spirits of the first and last emperors who reigned from the city, Emperor Kamu in 737 and Emperor Komei, of course we all know about him, 1831 to 1867. So Heian is a former name of Kyoto, and to my mind it's famous because there are always things going on, little kids running around being photographed, so it's a great opportunity if you're a portrait photographer. It also has beautiful iris gardens or water gardens around the back. Again, if you're just sort of driving by, you may not take the time to see them, so you pay a little bit extra and go around the back, and there are the flower gardens.
Oh, lovely.
So these, from memory, are really good around June, July, so midsummer. It's very hot and sweaty in Kyoto in those times, so it's not terribly comfortable. But of course,
But the flowers make up for it.
The flowers are spectacular.
And some water lilies.
You can run home to your air-conditioned hotel afterwards. So water lilies, irises of every size and description. And of course, being in Japan, they're all sort of semi-trained to come out at exactly the right time of year. Which is how the Japanese run their lives.
That's just nature, isn't it?
Well, it sort of is, but they help as much as they possibly can.
Give them
And
the
it's
right
the same
encouragement.
for the Cherry Blossom Festival, and of course for other festivals that you've seen.
It's a scruffy looking bird.
It is a little bit, yes. Yeah, but here are the water gardens. And they have these beautiful black pines, I think they are, with sort of contorted shapes, but just sort of wonderful to wander around. So I guess the entrance gates...
it's pretty big.
It's a bit of a statement.
Yeah.
They're very large, and I think they're made of concrete because there aren't enough trees that size. Gosh, time for dinner. So this is just a little bit of a showcase of Buddhist vegetarian food, and you'll get this if you stay in a monastery. Some of the more traditional guest houses will certainly serve this up, and essentially it's a number of vegetarian dishes that you can cook in front of you, and it's very delicious. A little bit further out of Kyoto, about half an hour on the local bus, is the rural town of Ohara, which sounds desperately Irish, but is in fact definitely Japanese. And in there is a temple called Sanzen-in. There are actually a number of temples around there, but Sanzen-in is probably the most famous. It's a temple of the Tendai sect of Japanese Buddhism, and it was founded by nobody less than the revered monk Saicho, who introduced Tendai Buddhism to Japan in 804. That's a long time ago. So it's a Monzeki temple, one of only a few temples whose head priest used to be members of the imperial family. So there we go, yes. But as you can see, it's got the usual sights. It has a river running through it, which is rather pretty. And in those days, again, these are from about 2010, these pictures, you were still permitted to take a tripod into these places. Now, of course, you can't, because, I guess, of safety concerns. And these are some shots later on, about 4:30 to 5, just as it was closing, and it's just absolutely beautiful. And here's a little bit earlier in the afternoon, so you get this fantastic dappled light coming through some of these trees. And again, it's one of those temples where you must take your shoes off, put them in a plastic bag, tie the plastic bag around your waist, or just hold it in your hand and then put them on when you get through the temple on the other side into the garden.
So now we're back in the city again, going to Nijo Castle. Now this is an interesting place. It was its construction started in 1603 as the Kyoto residence of the Tokugawa Ieyasu, first shogun or warlord of the Edo period.
Check out the front door.
Yeah, the entire complex is surrounded by stone walls and moats, but one of the most striking features is this Karamon gate, which is immensely ornate Chinese-style construction, gold and beautiful painted decorations,
black lacquerwork,
carving.
I think, yes.
It's fantastic. So the palace itself consists of several separate buildings linked by corridors with so-called nightingale floors. They squeak when they're stepped on in order to alert the guards to the presence of an intruder. The guards are in concealed chambers, and if there's a bad guy, they can leap out and grab him. Importantly, from a historical point of view, power was passed from the last shogun, Tokugawa Yoshinobu, to Emperor Meiji here at this very castle when the Japanese monarchy was restored in 1868.
It's the Meiji Restoration.
That's right. It served as an imperial palace for a time and then was opened to the public as a historical museum. UNESCO designated it a World Heritage Site in 1994.
I'm getting hungry again.
Of course you are.
Yep. We need to look around for something to eat. Well, I don't know. Let's try...
noodles.
Let's try some teishoku. And this is just a generic name for stuff that arrives as a set. So it could be noodles, it could be katsu, could be anything really. So very typical
And
Japanese.
then you go off to another
little temple called Ryoan-ji. And again, this is in the western part of Kyoto. It's a very famous... They say it's the most famous rock garden. And sure enough, it's fairly spectacular. It's an ex-aristocrat's villa during the Heian period. That's when Kyoto was a capital. And then it became a Zen temple in 1450, a long time ago. And belongs to the Myoshinji school of the Rinzai sect. Again, there's the Rinzai sect, who seem to be fairly predominant in the area. So it has some spectacular gardens. It has some lovely ponds, I suppose ponds or lakes even around it. As a notable addition to, of course, the Zen garden. So that's a nice one. And wandering up the hill a little bit further, just after dinner, of course, we have to stop for dinner and have some sukiyaki, which essentially is raw meat that you cook, and vegetables that you cook yourself. You pay a lot more for it, and you have to do the cooking. So a little bit further north is Ninna-ji. Again, when we arrived there was a procession of monks and religious bigwigs. Don't know why or don't know what was going on, but it was fairly colourful. And again, this is listed as a World Heritage Site. It's a temple of the Omoro school of the Shingon sect of Buddhism, founded in 888. So over many centuries, a member of the imperial family used to serve as Ninna-ji's head priest. And the temple was known as the Omoro Imperial Palace. So it has this wonderful pagoda there, 5-story pagoda.
Beautiful robes they're wearing.
They are, yeah. So the old geezers are led in under the shade of these umbrellas by the younger acolytes, I suppose. It wasn't raining, so it's a symbolic thing. Here's the band following in, tweeting away on the little flutes or whatever. So it was a very atmospheric spot to visit. I enjoyed that. And if you're athletic, you can walk up the western part of Kyoto, stopping at Ninna-ji and etc. etc. They're about half an hour walking distance, or you can get on the local bus and just 2 or 3 stops up. The next one up, of course, is the Golden Temple, which we've already been to.
We have.
And so it's time to say goodbye to Ninna-ji.
Bye, Ninna-ji.
Must be. Is it lunchtime again? Or no, we're going to look at some dress-up ladies. Now, if you're wandering around most parts of the Gion area, you'll notice what you think are geisha, and of course they're not. They are young women, Japanese, or tourists.
Or even middle-aged women.
Or sometimes middle-aged women, and sometimes men, dressed up in period costume. And there are a number of salons around central Kyoto that allow you to do this, and they dress up. It takes quite a long time to do all the makeup.
Makeup would take ages.
Absolutely stunning, and the sort of fiberglass dew in the hair and everything. So it's very accurate, very traditional. And these might be secretaries working for a company in Kyoto. It might be people.
Brain surgeons.
They could be brain surgeons. I've asked a couple in my halting Japanese if they don't mind me taking pictures, and one couple replied in a Birmingham accent, of course, I don't mind at all, because they were Chinese from the city of Birmingham, where I come from. So it's quite funny. And of course, when you're paying...
They're very convincing.
Well, you're paying 60, 70, well actually $200, probably like $200, to dress up and clip-clop around the streets. You want to be photographed, so they're always very happy to have their pictures taken, which is great. And here's a little dog that's also dressed up. So next, we must be going to something very special.
Very special.
Called Yabusame.
So this is a traditional Japanese horseback archery event, which has been practiced since the 12th century.
Here are the target guys.
Behind the screen. So this Yabusame originated to help samurai warriors prepare for battle. The practice has a close connection to the Shinto religion, so it's usually performed at Shinto shrines.
Whoa, look at that.
That's a good shot. So in this sport or activity, a mounted archer decked out in full traditional samurai gear starts at one end of the 255-metre track and gallops at very high speed toward the other end. Without even slowing down, he must fire each of his 3 arrows using his 2-metre-long bow at one of the 3 wooden targets, about 70 metres apart. And, not so easy, stop before he runs out of track as well. It takes about 20 seconds, and the score is based on how many targets are hit. The archer shouts, "Inyo, Inyo," meaning light and darkness, or yin and yang, as he releases his arrow. It takes years of practice. Not only do they have to shoot accurately, but they also have to learn to control the horse with only their knees.
It was spectacular. They were travelling at about 70 kilometres an hour, I think, yeah.
So really, as exciting as it is, this is actually really a ceremonial ritual rather than a sport. The victor receives no payment but the honour and glory.
He gets a white hanky, doesn't he?
He is presented with a white cloth to signify divine favour. Throughout the year, Japan hosts about 20 Yabusame events. We were fortunate that our visit to Kyoto in 2019, during Golden Week, coincided with the annual Yabusame Shinji on the 3rd of May. This is a purification ritual intended to prepare the Shimogamo shrine for the upcoming Hollyhock Festival later in May, which missed on this occasion.
Well, this was well worth it.
It was striking.
We had to sit for 2 hours.
There's the band. This
is
is the
winner.
victor.
There's the winner, and he wasn't even Japanese, was he? He was half Japanese.
I think he was probably half Japanese.
Yeah.
I don't really know, but it was.
He won. It looks like he's won a set of knives and forks, but
chopsticks.
Chopsticks. It was spectacular, and we sat amongst a group of housewives who'd come over from Osaka for the day,
Yes, they
who
shared
entertained us.
snacks with us and gave us a blanket to sit on.
They were very clever, yeah. So it was quite a spectacular experience.
And we're finished.
So thanks for watching.
And stay tuned for the next episode.
So we're going to go outside of Kyoto and have a look at other destinations around the Kyoto area. Until then, sayonara.